So I spent a fair amount of that time doing a kind of energy repair on the house because the container wasn't there to hold us. So I've spoken in the past about awakening through the individual sense of self, which then awakens through oneness of the plane that it's in. And then there's another level of surrendering open to the next larger inclusive sense of self that's individuated and then opens to that whole plane. So the personality can, and the personal human sense of mind can open up into a sense of awakeness and experience itself as oneness of this whole realm. And a lot of people have that experience, either sustained or have moments of it to know what I'm speaking about. And in my trajectory, that individuated sense of self that has then opened to that whole plane can surrender deeper to then the soul layer, where the individuated sense of a soul then has access to all the memory cataloging and of one singular truth of consciousness, one singular being manifesting itself in multiplicity, categorizes all of its experience through these individuated lenses. So your humanness, your personality, your mind is really a vehicle for the individuated experience to occur, but it's simultaneously oneness creating that to have all these experiences. And so these structures are an organizing principle for oneness to taste itself, feel itself, live itself, express itself in utter joy. And in that opening through the soul, then that individuated sense of self can also then surrender into oneness in that plane of existence. And go again in through that experience of oneness. And that process can happen again. That individuated sense of self that has opened as oneness can then surrender to the next level up. And I've referred to these different levels as game boards. And the individuated sense of self as the player piece in that game board. And it's all one singular consciousness. It's one I am. It's one happening. It's one singular truth expressed in this exquisite multiplicity. And every time there's been an opening through oneness, through a plane, then the fundamental aspects of consciousness that make up the structures of that plane come into oneness, are experienced as self, and in that experience of oneness and experiencing that as self, then the knowledge and information of that aspect of consciousness is then intrinsic. So these elements, water, air, fire, magnetism, attraction, all these different aspects. I'm gonna separate those out and stick with the elements first. And so in that initial opening, there was a recognition that the elements are conscious, the same way this is conscious. Because everything is one singular consciousness, expressing itself in this multiplicity for all these game boards to exist and for players to exist in the game boards to play. And my initial cultural arrogance of that the environment is not alive, or an arrogance in relation to cultures that and I can't even say it now. Can someone say it for me? Thank you. Right, these external objects and how silly or stupid or narcissistic that was. Part of my culture taught that. This culture that's based on a science of things being separated that can be observed and controlled. It's just, there's a deeper thing that's going on. And so in this initial opening, there was a surprise and instant humility of, oh, got that one wrong. And in that information then becoming intrinsic, the brilliance and the wisdom of creation continued to fill itself out, all these details. And when we rest in the let me say this differently. So the simultaneousness of the individuation of the vehicle and the oneness of the plane. I'm going to start this differently again. So there's a silence because there's a transmission happening of what I'm about to try to articulate. So again, just always being open to all the levels of communication that are at play. It's easy to be misled thinking your body is separate because it looks like you can get up and walk around. But it is in complete oneness with this plane. It's over 70% water. You're breathing oxygen. How many times a minute? How long will this vehicle last if you're not breathing and you don't have water? Not very long. So there is a constant exchange of the environment with the environment, the substance that you are, the vehicle for which consciousness then gets to ride and live and express through. And the food you're eating and the nourishment from the ground, and where did that food come from? Well, the sun fed those plants, which roots were in the ground, which soaked up the minerals and took in the water. And creation did an amazing thing and then produced something that this system could then eat. So you're eating sun and rain and earth. And then this is what it gets turned into in this creation. So when we start really looking at it, you can see this miracle of an individual vehicle that is in oneness with the plane. And you get to have the experience of being an individual. It's a stunning, stunning creation. And then in opening through this plane and being with those elements in a more refined level, the deeper understanding of how they interact with each other started to come forward. And there are lots of healing modalities that are based on a deep refinement of how these elements all work in relation to each other and then are seen in your body in terms of health. So Chinese medicine was what my background was, dealing with the elements. And their correspondence with certain organs, with certain functions. I'm just going to be quiet for a minute. I didn't realize we were going to have kitchen sounds, so I need to just go deeper than I am. So when I'm with these elements and their relationship to each other, and the profound brilliance of that aspect of consciousness and their union, their individuatedness and their union, their individuatedness and their harmony. When I'm with this in my body, it creates a deeper level of vitality and a sustained nourishment. And there's a recognition of the individuatedness being one, being in oneness. And so the apparent paradox collapses. And there's a resting with the vitality of the universe here as this body. And so the larger totality of all of these game boards, as one surrenders through the individuated nature into the oneness, then the vitality, the totality of that aspect then collapses into the present moment and into the experienced substance of form. And so then awakening through all these layers has profound practical benefit in terms of your sustained vitality and joy and ecstaticness. So it's not, for me, about opening to a transcendent place of moving beyond this reality. It's an opening to a deep truth where you are this reality and you're every reality all simultaneously. And living the exquisiteness of your creation. And so starting with the house and opening and just seeing, oh my goodness, oh, this poor house, you know, and feeling all the elements in their combinations, with the density that's been accumulated over time through interactions that have happened here. So that was a lot of what was happening. I'm gonna just drop in deeper again. The sounds are, I wasn't prepared. So when I come into this deep, deep embodiment, that's what I'm interested in supporting, that waking on that level. And there's a profound surrendering that's happening. There's a profound surrender. So in this, there's been the pathway for me of the mind surrendering to a larger mind, the personality mind surrendering to oneness, and then the mind with that oneness surrendering through the heart and the wisdom of the heart. And then that unified surrendering through the body consciousness. And in those initial stages, the way I would speak about it was that each individuated expression had the same I am. And so the I am of the mind was in this surrendering process. And so it would recognize its sense of self and then let go of its consciousness, let go of its envelope, let go of knowing itself as it was, or feel like it was going to die. Surrendering to letting go of the envelope which is created for the individual experience to happen. It's a gift. There's no problem. There's nothing wrong with the ego. It's just the wrapping. So in that surrendering, then initially through that singular I am, it's still the way you'd say me, feels like me, right? That cozy me that you know. Well, opening up through oneness and being one with everything, it feels the same in that it's like, oh, it's still me. Only me is just a lot bigger. And after that, there was a surrendering through that sense of me, that sense of I am. And then there was what I called cessation, or no existence. There was nothing to perceive or be perceived And I would speak about that as nothing. And then the I am reappeared. And the way it seems now, having gone through that many times, is that cessation point is when the vehicle that one is perceiving through lets go of itself and hasn't opened yet in a different vehicle of perception. And so, when there was an opening through the organs, that vehicle of I am, of Christian mind or oneness mind, that lens would surrendered itself and opened in through the vehicle of the liver. And the I am is the same. I am the liver. And then the I am was resting as that envelope and intrinsically understood itself of how it functioned, what it liked. Its sweet nesting next to the spleen and the pancreas and the elements were then all seen in harmony again. And the function, the expression, the purpose, the joy, the will of that organ all came forward, intrinsically understood. So for me, there's been a fluidity through these different vehicles of expression, through the different organs, through the esophagus, through the structures of the brain, through other people's minds and other people's hearts, through the universe, through different races of being, through bugs and animals and galaxies, and we're the whole thing. And that cessation point the way I relate to it now is that doorway in between opening to another aspect of consciousness. And I also relate to that as the next place in which consciousness will then reveal itself to itself, where you can't see yet. So I want to clarify that. There's an internal sense of for me, of surrendering back into that which I cannot see, back into that which I do not know. Where I cannot see myself, I do not know myself. And so on the soul level, when that had all opened, of having access to the organization of past life memory or experience, the way the larger aspects of consciousness organize that memory or cataloging experience, right? When I was open on that soul level and could not see further back, that was the resting point of awareness, to see and know itself and understand and taste and reflect. And then at some point, then there's a call to surrender back through that cessation point, that doorway of not knowing, of not existing, to die, to experience that complete letting go. And through that, then that doorway, it's a complete and total surrender of everything. And then in my experience, then the next level, game board, opens. And then there's a sense of self resting and seeing from there, from a much bigger perspective than the one that was prior. So the good news is it keeps getting better. Like, it's all exquisite. You know, when the individuated person, that individuated sense of self opens to start having experience of oneness with the earth and humanity, you always feel like you're finding God. Because you are. Because you are God. And you're just opening to a larger perspective of yourself. So it feels awesome. And then opening on the soul level. You know, some people open to that memory bank and some don't. It doesn't matter. It totally doesn't matter. But whether you have the access to that information or not, it still opens up to, it's exponential. So the shift isn't like 1 + 1 is 2. It's 1 + 1 is 10,000. It's exponential. And so every time there's an opening, then having opened up to 10,000, that feels pretty good relative to, you know, the 1 + 1. And then when you surrender again, well, that 10,000 turns into 1,000,000. So, yeah, I know. It's the awakening game. That's what we are. And that's what we're playing. We're playing with ourselves. So, is there anything I shared that you have a question about or you want me to expand upon? Yeah.
When you talk about the demembering, letting go of the membrane, and I guess it dissolves or disappears or whatever, if it's possible to live from very high perspective without those membranes intact, why is it that they are there?
I'm going to give you a much fuller answer. There's a certain kind of exploration you get to have from that perspective that you don't get to have. It's different when you're resting in larger perspectives. So in terms of the exploration that's happening, part of that fractaling out into smaller and smaller bits for detailed tasting, right? That's part of what's happening. So again, that's why I'm saying there's nothing wrong. And that those lenses and vehicles are perfect, and they're part of the game. So that's one piece. The other piece is that I've been seeing those structures in the little nanobit. I don't have language for all these little things I'm seeing, but it's like physics, but it's all conscious. It's like physics and engineering and structures like these. So I'll see all these little nanobits and feel their like, you know how bugs can like stand on top of water? What's that, tensile? What's that word for like how water, surface tension? That it does this amazing thing, right? But what's water? It's all these molecules that are then binding and rebinding and they're playing with each other, right? And can, you know, separate out into a drop, have energy move through it, make it a wave. You know, it's like when you start looking at it's just looking at the details, it's just brilliant. It's mind-boggling. So I've been with these energetic structures that create that separate sense of mind and that envelope. and seeing the way the conditioning or one's experience, one's interpretation of reality, both through thought and emotions, influence that lens or that envelope, so then consciousness then sees through it and perceives reality based on the way it's been interpreting, which is all changeable. And when it's time, or when there's a deeper satisfaction with the exploration through that vehicle, then awakening is going to start to become interesting. There are a whole lot of people on the planet where it's not interesting. And that's perfect. It's what's happening there. A certain exploration is happening. And yet we're also one consciousness. And so as the movement of beings that are called into awakeness open in that way, it shifts the field and the collective. And so that movement starts to pull and make it more interesting to other people, which then in turn makes it more interesting to other people, and in turn makes it more interesting. Right? So it's just this the awakening game, right? So I can only speak about my experience. And which is changing. So certain vehicles of perception are becoming less interesting for me here. But they still can gain traction. So oftentimes life happens and nothing sort of gains traction that will elicit a movement into that vehicle of mind in the way that it used to function before this whole awakening trajectory happened. But one of the differences is it's then interesting. Wow, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. As opposed to getting upset about it and having a reaction to a reaction. You know, now it's much more something that's just curiosities. Like, okay, there's something in there, there's a gift in there, there's a gem, there's a learning, there's a revelation waiting to happen. Right, so if I get irritated, it doesn't happen that often. But if it does, as opposed to getting concerned that I'm irritated, it's more, look at that. Wow, what's that about? I know. And then things just continue to reveal. So I could see the possibility, but it's not my current reality, right? But in this movement, I could see they're just becoming less and less interesting, because in terms of a player piece or vehicle being made for a certain exploration, when it's completed, when it's satisfied its exploration, okay, I could see them functioning without having that be interesting to the universe anymore. when a couple of years ago, I visited Amma, and she was sharing with me about the elements in the next game board up that I hadn't experienced before. So I had experienced them on the soul plane, that soul level. But there's another vehicle of consciousness that was opening at that time, that I had opened through the individual aspect of that, but hadn't opened yet through that whole plane. And so in my time with her, she was giving me a major download on each of the elements in that level game board. And I was really surprised to see that they were there, the fire and water and air, that they were there. And there was again another layer of profound humility and respect, and kind of bringing it back to the body, and then being with that trajectory of the union of those, their individual nature and the union of those. And I started it's another whole body of information. I just want to not, it would be overwhelming. I want it to come out in a way that is accessible. So I'm going to add another piece in here. So when I first started talking about the elements, and then I said attraction, and like there are these forces of nature, which again are all conscious. And we experience those in different ways in ourselves. One of them that people are really familiar with is that inner sense of direction. Ooh, I need to go here. That's one of the forces of consciousness. It's its own uniqueness, and it's you. And it's a guiding principle. That's how it manifests here. And that inner sense of alignment, right? It's part of that aspect. I mean, there's a lot more details I could go into in terms of anatomy, but I don't want to do that right at this moment. I'm talking about these forces. And so when I opened to the elements and how they relate to each other, I was then having a deeper understanding of the forces and how they all are at play in creating harmony and a balanced vehicle of consciousness to live and explore and experience through and as. And so in this exchange with Amma, I was then present with, shifting from the 10,000 to the million, and being with the elements in that level of refinement and that massive scope, and how that refined alignment and harmony I need a word. I don't have a word. It's like, it's just the mystery of being, of how we are and emanate and call to ourselves and create. It's like a toroidal feedback loop. These words aren't... All right, I'm going to speak about this as if it's linear. It's not linear. I'm just going to speak about it that way to try and get this across. So in that sense of alignment with that frequency of the elements, my whole body wanted to then shift all of its vehicles, all of the elements of the water and the air and the fire, all of the little structures of the human mind, heart, body, soul, body, mind, heart, soul, body, all wanted to have that level of refinement be here all the way through. To be in oneness with that, so that was then intrinsic, this level of refinement in through this water in this body. So there's a I'm just going to be quiet for a minute. I'm going to bring me back to your question if I don't finish it. Or maybe I finished it, I'm not sure. But this is also where this just total excitement comes from. Because when I'm open on that level, that million, it's really infinite billion, but since I was using the million example, just stay with that. That level of consciousness, all the particles of existence of this universe are your body. And you the same way when you open as oneness through this plane and you feel like you're one with the tree, and you're one with the mountain, and it feels so good, like that level of expansion, and you experience it as your body. You experience the water flowing as you, as water, is flowing in that oneness. And so in this next level up, it's the same thing. Of the particles of this universe are your particles that are moving and interfacing with each other. And so if we bring this back into the groundedness of this body, that infinite field or toroidal field of this existence of all these layers of existence collapsing into themselves, then all of that information and wisdom and energy and life force and creative potential is right here. It's right here, it's right here, it's right here, it's right here. It's right here. That's right, the reason I thought of Amma, or Amma appeared, because when she shares with me, I'm then in oneness with her, and then I have her experiences shared with me. So then I can experience through her a level of consciousness that my system is in the trajectory of, right? We're all in that trajectory. We're all in that awakening game, and it will look unique for each of us. But she was sharing, is showing me it's interesting. I haven't looked at this in detail, but in terms of the similarities of what's happening, in terms of how I'm functioning, in terms of the healing sessions and what's, because when you're opening on that larger level, then there still is a recognition of other and a respect of other, but there's also a place of, don't know what word to use, jurisdiction or something where there's an appropriateness or an alignment, an appropriate alignment to catalyze a shift over there, because there is here. And so there's a transforming of what might appear as other on some of these other game boards. But on a deeper level, it's self that's transforming itself. Which is how I've spoken about it in the past, but I wasn't functioning from this larger level, this particle nature, when I used that analogy in the very beginning of when I was trying to explain, like I'd say, all right, you're a finger and I'm a finger and I just woke up and I'm the hand and I know you're different, but I'm just the hand. So it's like you're still responsible, but you're the hand too. And, I was trying to like explain this oneness and individuation and how healing happens and, waking up to this larger place. So it would be fun to ask Amma this question, right? Because my experience of her is that she's functioning in a quite significantly larger capacity, where envelopes either weren't even present when she came in. That's not what she was here. That's not what this incarnation was for. So they just weren't even present. And that anyway, that's the best I can answer, right? Like when I say, like in terms of me responding, I can only speak from my own experience. And it's interesting for me to look at different teachers and see where their consciousness is functioning from, where those vehicles are and how they articulate what their experience is and the layers they're speaking from. So did that?
Yeah, I like you answered all of my questions.
Oh.
As I've been listening to you talk about the different game boards and opening up to the larger and the larger, one of the things that I was wondering is the evolutionary movement and the fueling of that is sort of, you use certain words like surrendering through and volition that seem to have an element of choice at some point. I don't know, I mean, if I look at the game board and there's this human on the densest game board that might have a volition to open to the next, and then from that level, I'm wondering, when you open to the next and you go through this dying of the I am at one game board, willingness to move through that to the unknown of the next game board, does it feel like there's a volition or choice point? Or does it feel more like how I envision a seed opening that's already, all the information is in the seed, and it's going to open as it gets nourishment and so on.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I'm thinking about what affects the trajectory. And, you were saying, Amma may have come in with a certain, what do you call it, a blueprint or things that were maybe even most helpful to the universal mind to have opened in that vehicle. A year ago, I think it would have more of a tinge for me of like give me the secret and sort of that kind of, I don't know what word to use, but I want to open to the next game board. So is there a choice point in me? Is there a certain openness? And it's actually not coming from that same place anymore. It's coming from much more of a sense of the preciousness of exactly where I am on the game boards, and the divinity of all of them, and the wholeness of all of them. So it doesn't have the same charge for me as I ask it. But I was following as certain words, and it just struck me like of wanting to understand a little bit more of the unfolding. And I felt there was something that spoke to me when you said, what draws your interest? Because what draws your interest, what drew all of us into this room, had an impulse to it, like an evolutionary impulse, a something. I'm not learning to sail today. I'm here. But I'm still kind of curious, like, about the impulse.
I deeply appreciate your question, because it's so funny. It's so interesting. I'm just going to talk this out. Let's see what happens. I'm not wanting to create longing for people to open to something that's not what's present and relevant for them. And yet at the same time, I'm so inspired to invite and point out and highlight what we are. So it's like I don't want to create longing or yearning, but at the same time it's like, oh, honey, wait a minute. Shh. Right. Hi. Wake up. Right? Like all of this that I'm talking about is true at any single point on the game board. You are this totality. Whether you're making toast and being angry at the toaster because it's not freaking working, or you're having an absolute blissed out experience out on the ground in like the ecstatic universe, feeling yourself on the edge of the earth, held by the ground with stars, or, the same truth is there. So part of what I'm wanting to ignite, right? It's like, honey, you're on fire. You're a light right now. It's just true now. And these movements of will or interest or a seed opening, they're all aspects of how consciousness plays with itself. So your experience might be a seed. And so you come to retreats to have a little extra, plant food, or to water yourself, or to get a little more sunshine. It could be that your will is wanting a different angle than how it's been aiming itself. And it comes here, and then the will suddenly realizes, oh, I can go a different direction. And then that vehicle of expression functions in a new way in that moment for that particular individuated expression. So it could be all and any of all the different things that you're saying. And they're all just beautiful explorations of the universe. Did that help?
That answer helped a long time ago in my work with you. And was so helpful in just calming down and being more fully just in the moment without this need to hurry, which didn't make any sense, wasn't how it was going to work anyway. But it wasn't what I was really asking right now, which was more of like wanting an understanding of whether volition, from whatever level of the game board, what fuels the ship. What?
Can you tell me more what you mean by volition? You're asking what fuels volition?
It's just that I don't have the capacity to understand how things unfold. And I was so curious as you described moving from one game board and surrendering back through to the other one. And since you've done that, I was curious what you might say about your perspective on how that happens. Is it just a happening, no different than, it's a little cloudier today and the weather will change, and that it's just happening like weather. So does that make my question clear? I feel like I'm not able to articulate it. It's just, how does the movement happen? And maybe that's just, maybe it is sort of, it's a universal movement through vehicles, so that there's all these.
I still don't know that I'm understanding your question. But I would say that both, and that yes, it's just what's happening. Just as someone's making toast, someone else is going to engineering school, someone else is having a baby, right? Yes, it's all just happening. That's life unfolding. And this deepening exploration of the little details through all of that. The other thing that I'm sort of drawn to say is that it's another level, another way of phrasing the question is, who are you? Because you're wanting to know yourself in that level. So surrendering through that question will most likely answer it. Because there are so many details in terms of the physics of that, the larger mind of that, the exploration of that. And on each level, there's, it just keeps opening. And yet one always comes back to the mystery. Because there's always a level of existence that one can't see and can't know, because one is arising out of it. And so these questions, these explorations, both end up opening through the details of the manifestation of existence, and returning one to the mystery from which you arise.
That
Great. Great. Because any one bit that we understand, it still is always arising out of the what you don't know and can't see, and when you do open up to that next level, yeah, that's opened up to another whole level of perspective, but you still can't see from back there. Yeah, and then, in terms of going back a little to your question, in this kind of holographicness of all these layers all together, there's also the lived not knowing. So the lens where one can't see from, that all of that is simultaneous, of being with all these lenses, from the 1 + 1 is 2, then the 1 + 1 is 10,000, and then 10,000 and 10,000 is billion, whatever, right? So all those then become what's awareness is aware of itself arising out of where it can't see, and resting is nothing, or that emptiness. So the mystery, so it's like just living, we're a living mystery.
My question has been, as I practice in my life, even in an instruction on meditation, basic instruction is go back to the breath, for example.
Go back to what?
To the breath. Yeah, if you get distracted, you can go back to the breath. It can be one instruction. The thing is, the question is, what directs the attention? Because if there's a moment in which you get distracted and you don't realize that you're distracted, but what directs attention? And when you say that it opens to the next level, then again the same thing happens. But when you said that there's gonna be always a mystery, then it was like blank. Because the beauty, what I heard is that question is what takes you there, having that question. So what changed for me right now was that I had that question as I want the answer, but when I heard you saying what you said, it was, that's what surrender is. Just keep the question.
Yeah, that's awesome. I totally appreciate your highlighting that. And when I was saying that in the answering, that the question is answered, but the mystery remains.
Exactly.
That the it's like the arising point of existence and the surrender point of not knowing, of not existence, are simultaneous. So yes, the answer will often answer itself through the expression, but that point, that inquiry of we're asking where that question arises from, or following that question in, that's the pathway to that unknowable, unnameable truth. Yeah, thank you. So that feels like a beautiful place to end our morning. Yeah, I can speak, often about all the magnificence, because I'm also wanting to highlight that for people. That it's not about a transcendent experience on your cushion that you just don't live from. But I really appreciate that highlighting. That's the pathway.